John Matthews sat at his kitchen table, staring at his laptop screen. The early morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow on his face. He sipped his coffee and opened his email, feeling the usual anticipation. There it was, an email from Lydia. Lydia had entered John's life 6 months ago. They met on a dating website, where Lydia's profile stood out amidst the usual faces. Her photos showed a striking woman in her mid-30s with dark, wavy hair and an enchanting smile. Her messages were always thoughtful and intelligent. And over time, John found himself looking forward to their daily exchanges more and more. As they corresponded, John learned that Lydia was a freelance graphic designer living in Paris. She often shared photos of her work, which John found impressive. Their conversations moved from the dating site to email, then to phone calls, but never video chats. John, a 50-year-old accountant living in Denver, felt a connection with Lydia that he hadn't experienced in years. The first time Lydia mentioned her financial troubles, John didn't think much of it. She told him about a client who hadn't paid for a big project and how it left her struggling to cover her rent. John sympathized but didn't offer help. After all, they were still practically strangers. However, as their relationship deepened, Lydia's financial woes seemed to worsen. She called him in tears one night, saying her landlord was threatening eviction. "I don't know what to do, John. I'm so scared," she sobbed. John's heart went out to her. "How much do you need to cover the rent?" he asked, already knowing what he was about to do. $2,000, Lydia replied hesitantly. "But I can't ask you to." "It's okay," John interrupted. "I want to help. I'll send the money today." He transferred the money and felt a sense of relief when Lydia called later, her voice full of gratitude. "You're my hero, John. I don't know what I would have done without you." The requests for money continued over the next few months. There was always a new crisis, a medical emergency, a broken laptop crucial for her work, a visa issue requiring immediate payment. John, who had savings and a comfortable income, sent the money each time, convinced he was helping the woman he loved. They talked about meeting in person, and Lydia promised to visit him as soon as her finances stabilized. John envisioned their future together, growing more attached to the idea with each passing day. One day, Lydia called him with exciting news. "I've landed a big contract with an international company. This will solve all my problems, and I'll finally be able to come see you." John was thrilled for her. But then came the inevitable hitch. She needed funds to travel to the company's headquarters in Hong Kong to finalize the deal. "It's just a few $1,000s for the flight and accommodation. Once the deal is done, I'll pay you back with interest." John hesitated this time. He had already sent Lydia nearly $20,000, depleting his savings. But the thought of finally meeting her in person pushed him to agree. He transferred the money, hoping this would be the last time. Days turned into weeks with no word from Lydia. John grew anxious and sent her multiple messages, but there was no response. Panic set in, and he realized something was terribly wrong. He contacted the dating website, only to find that Lydia's profile had been deleted. Desperate, John hired a private investigator. A few weeks, the investigator delivered the crushing news. Lydia didn't exist. The photos and identity she used belonged to a real woman in Italy who had no idea her likeness was being used in a scam. The emails and messages had come from various locations around the world, making it impossible to track the real culprit. John was devastated. He felt foolish and humiliated, realizing he'd been duped out of nearly $30,000. The betrayal cut deep, and the emotional toll was even greater than the financial loss. He had allowed himself to be vulnerable, to open his heart only to be exploited by a faceless stranger. In the aftermath, John struggled to rebuild his life. He shared his story with friends and family who supported him through the difficult time. He also joined a support group for victims of online scams, finding some solace in knowing he wasn't alone. Slowly, John learned to trust again, but he never forgot the painful lesson Lydia, or whoever she really was, taught him. But was there anything John could have done to avoid being scammed? Or was his fate sealed the moment he ran across Lydia's online profile? There's actually a few things John could have changed to avoid being scammed. For starters, John should have taken the slow approach and asked Lydia lots of questions. That way he could vet Lydia to determine if she was compatible with him. Also, by moving slowly, John would be able to see Lydia's red flags, or at the very least, notice when something Lydia says doesn't make sense. Next, John could have investigated Lydia's profile pictures. If someone's profile looks too good to be true, it usually is. By running an image search on Lydia's pictures, John could see if her pictures show up elsewhere online. If her photos show up somewhere else, then John would have known the person he was talking to wasn't real. Additionally, John should have been cautious of Lydia after she made repeated promises to meet in person but always came up with excuses why she couldn't meet. This was a huge red flag that John missed. Romance scammers will have multiple excuses why they can't meet in person. Finally, John should have never sent Lydia any money without meeting her in person. Now, this is easier said than done, especially if you're lonely and desperate for companionship. John was in his 50s and eager to find a mate. He thought he found that in Lydia, but $30,000 later, he realized it was a mirage. From a scammer perspective, John was the perfect target.